REGI is threatening to sue Doublelift. We've got LCS roster rumors and changes happening. And JNT MSI kicks off in literally like 3 hours from when we're recording this. Episode 84 of the Clown Fiesta podcast is underway. JNT and I apologize for missing last week. We had some things going on. But we are back, and we plan to be back for the foreseeable future at regular times, right, JNT? Every Monday is the plan for now?
Yep. MSI
So
on
that's
that.
good.
Starts tomorrow. What the hell?
Yeah, man, that happened quick, eh? Like, holy crap, we're running out of time to do the episode, and well, MSI is underway. So let's get us underway because okay, there's so much to talk about. The REGI stuff we got to start there. Do you remember JNT when Doublelift first made his accusations back in, I want to say November, with the whole? Do you remember what my take was at the time or no?
No.
My take was basically that, so at the time, we didn't know that there was going to be an investigation into REGI. And my take was pretty much like, please do an investigation, and once we know what happened, what comes from the investigation, then I will have an opinion on how I feel about REGI and whether I think he's at fault or whatnot. Now, the investigation is not concluded. However, I do feel like I have enough now to have a take on this because I just don't believe in coincidences, or not to this extent, right? You got the article that just dropped this past week. We'll get into that. There's lots from that article. There's the videos from like 10 years ago, and yes, they're from 10 years ago, but it's still evidence nonetheless. There's the lawsuit letter that he sends Doublelift, which is like basically saying that, to me, points to exactly what Doublelift's point was, that he'll bully people into shutting their mouths. And then you have everyone leaving TSM. Like, there's no world where all of this stuff exists together, and I could sit here and be like, oh, REGI might still be a good guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why it's like, even though the investigation hasn't finished, and if the investigation does finish and they find other things, then maybe my opinion will change. But I feel like at this point, I got enough to go off of to be like, yeah, like, REGI is not running TSM, which is not a hot take by any means, but I know that I have enough to say now that, like, it's very clear that the way REGI is running TSM is absolutely awful, and it's not just all rumors. Like, there seems to be some truth to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially when everything was coming out, kind of as you mentioned, with regards to that Doublelift stream, where he basically just, like, started reaming TSM for, like, 2 days in a row. And this was, kind of during the off season after Worlds, and there was talks about Doublelift possibly rejoining TSM, and he was kind of telling this whole story that the main he wanted to rejoin TSM, potentially because he was going to play with Bjergsen again, because Bjergsen was also returning to pro play, and this Doublelift shared this whole story where like him and REGI basically just got pissed off at each other, and then Doublelift kind of came back and was trying to be apologetic and was trying to do good by TSM and rejoin the team and bring TSM back into contention, because for the last 3 years, they'd previously not been doing very well. And then, he kind of gets rejected by REGI, and then all of this comes out. And at the time, I think everybody sort of thought it was just Doublelift being super emotional and kind of venting out a lot of his frustration. And people weren't exactly sure what to do with all the information that he was giving us, because, when emotions are running high, you can maybe you can exaggerate some things. You can maybe say some things you don't exactly mean.
To exaggerate, right? Like, he's known for that. So.
Yeah, and you might not be saying everything with like 100% certainty and clarity and like getting your facts absolutely straight. So I think everybody was kind of taking that with like a little grain of salt and kind of was, as you said, like, well, let's see what this investigation brings up. But then here we are about 6 months later with this article coming out from the Washington Post, which is basically detailing this whole like culture of fear around the employees at TSM and how they're too scared to, share their true thoughts with REGI, and they're always it makes it very difficult to go against him when it comes to like the day-to-day operations of the business, because he just, one, has so much power in the company, and two, makes these very rash decisions. So I think after reading this article, like I remember reading it, I was like, dude, this thing isn't ending. Like, I just kind of assumed this was going to be like, I didn't think like we were going to get all of this new information and all of these various, obviously unnamed witnesses. And I think there was one person who was referenced multiple times throughout the article. I don't remember his name. I have it up here. Maybe if I can find it all.
And then there was other people that wanted to remain anonymous for obvious reasons.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. And, it was just kind of this huge like stamp of approval that like everything that Doublelift was saying was true to a certain extent, in terms of the way that REGI, in his words, in his terms, bullies and rampages throughout the organization. It's like his way or the highway, basically.
and even if it's not true, at the very least, there's multiple people saying the same things that Doublelift originally went on about. Which is why I say, like, I don't really believe in coincidences that this many people would step forward and say all these things. A lot of them obviously wanting to remain anonymous for the reasons that were put out in the article. You got people saying that they don't want to speak up because they don't know which version of REGI they're going to get. They're going to get, maybe it's the REGI that feels like, belittling them and embarrassing them in meetings or in Discord calls. Or you have people saying that people that would contradict REGI would mysteriously be fired a couple days later. And you also hear people that used to work at TSM and left TSM no longer even want to work in the industry anymore.
Dude, I think the funniest thing that I remember reading from that article and that Doublelift said on his video was like, nobody wanted to talk to REGI unless they had witnesses around because they knew they were just going to get screamed at. And like, I just like what, like one, that's fucked up, but two, that's also really funny.
Sad, right?
It's funny that it's reached a certain point where you don't feel like you can have an open and honest conversation with your boss unless there are other people around to, be witnesses potentially down the line. Which is just,
and that's a problem.
It's hilarious, but it's like super fucked up that it's kind of come to a point in that company, in that organization, that is how the employees are operating out of fear of the, controlling person.
Yeah, of the guy that's calling all of the shots.
Yeah.
Like literally any shot he wants to call, it's his because he's the CEO. So it's like what he says goes. And obviously that's bad when you have someone that's been abusing players and staff from what the article is saying. So lots of bad stuff there. For people that don't know the article, it's called "At TSM and Blitz, Staff Describe Toxic Workplace and Volatile CEO," obviously referring to REGI. So I don't think we need to go through the whole article because there's a lot. Like JNT said, it just wasn't ending. But those are just a few things that stood out to us as to like, there's it. I wouldn't even call it irrefutable evidence, but there's just so much to refute that it's like, oh my god, man. It's just overwhelming.
Just one thing to sort of put it into perspective a little bit. Like, I know esports journalism can kind of sometimes be like a bit of a meme in terms of like the outlets that are providing this news and the people that are even providing this news. But like, dude, this is an article on the Washington Post. Like, that is a very respected newspaper and like source. Like that is no like Joe Schmo tweeting out some shit or like an article on like, I don't know, Dexterto or what is it, like the Dot Esports. Like this should be a big deal. And I think people are recognizing that it is a big deal just based off of kind of what we saw on like social media after the fact. That the main thing that kind of comes to mind is like all the former TSM employees kind of giving their 2 cents about it. There was tons of people who came out on Twitter, basically like, they were talking about the whole contractor versus employee type argument that's kind of, talked about much later in the article, where a lot of these former TS employees are basically speaking up and saying like, hey, I was originally brought on as a contractor, but I was basically being a full-time employee without the pay or the benefits or even like the status.
So messed up.
And that was the other thing that was quite alarming because you saw a ton of former TSM employees that were coming out on Twitter and were talking about these things and basically saying how, they were going to keep quiet because they didn't want their reputation to be slandered. And like, there's just like so many things to say about it. And if you haven't read the article, I recommend you go read it. It is quite a lengthy article. Like I said, like it just felt like it wasn't ending, but it's just all like, it's good. And it's good that it's out there.
It's good that it's out there, but it is a tough read if you think about like the way I look at it is like I've wanted to get into esports myself for a long time. I'm sure there are people listening to this podcast that would love to work in esports. Now, let's imagine you get your dream job at TSM, which, by the way, was a top-tier org, and I say was, a top-tier org in North America. You go there, and now it's just put to shit because of one asshole. I think that's so sad when I hear like people no longer want to work in esports anymore just because of the time they had at TSM. That is so disheartening.
Yeah, and I know like normally we're talking about TSM in a more like league context based off of, what the LCS team is doing and, whatever. But we've seen, since Bjergsen sort of moved to the coaching role and now he's no longer on the team, Doublelift no longer on the team, like it feels like TSM has lost their star power from like as a team full of players. But now, I mean, we've talked about this before, but if you circle back and just look at the higher ups and some of the, I wouldn't even call them executives. What would you call them? Just like the premier people within TSM, like Max, I don't know his last name, but Max, the guy who runs TSM Legends, and then the guy who took it over from him, I think his name was Andrew or something, and then Lena's no longer in TSM. TSM's losing a bunch of like their popular streamers. I remember like one of the big ones was Myth, I think about a year ago. Maybe it was a bit longer, maybe it was a bit shorter. But you kind of are seeing this like slow and steady decline of TSM, and it's now sort of branching, if you just look at it from a league context, it's now branching much further beyond that, and it's way more apparent than you would have thought 1 year ago.
Yeah, and the one thing that I wanted to ask you, J&T, because we've talked so many times on this podcast about whether CL or TSM is the new CLG, right? We've had that discussion many times. What's that?
They are, bro.
See, I don't think so. I still think no, but here's the reason why. I always need to explain this before people freak out. The way I classify the CLG is like CLG went like 4 splits in a row, right? With losing being like 9th or 10th, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, TSM's at 1 already, so
right.
Let's keep it going.
And honestly, and they don't seem to be making changes yet. We'll get into that a little bit later. So if they were to, I wouldn't even wait for 4. I would say they're the new CLG if they have 3 straight splits of this. I don't even think you need 4 to be like classified in that same level, because I think 3 splits in a row at like 9th or 10th is like CLG level kind of stuff. But that's not even where I want to go with this. I want to ask the question of like, will TSM ever be TSM again? Because I don't think they will, right? Like there was TSM that was winning year over year over year, and they were always in the conversation for being the top org or going to Worlds or whatever it was, right? And now it feels like they've fallen from that at the very least. Like maybe they're not quite the CLG yet because they've only had 1 bad split where they finished 9th or 10th or whatever. But as far as becoming TSM again, that brand that we used to know, I don't see it happening. How can it happen when this many people hate the CEO, the continuous face of the brand, and they've lost all the other faces that people loved, like the Doublelift, like the Bjergsen, Parth, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what I was saying a little bit before, like in terms of performance as the league team goes, like what they missed Worlds in season 8 and 9. They did make it in 10 after winning Summer because they kind of had that miracle run through the lower bracket. And then season 11, they didn't make it. And season 12 Spring, as far as we can tell, is just like a huge dumpster fire.
You forgot to mention the 06 when they did go.
Wait, which one? Oh, yeah, true. Yeah.
The 06 when they did go. So,
yeah, but yeah. I mean, like, same with all the people who were on TSM at the time. They probably blocked that out of their memory because it was just like way too embarrassing. Yeah. But I definitely don't think TSM is a top team anymore in terms of like league. I think it's been pretty clear that ever since about season, I guess 11 now, like you can definitively say that 100 Thieves is, within that top 3. I think if you had to name the top 3, it would still be Cloud9, 100 Thieves, and Team Liquid. Obviously, Evil Geniuses, I think, has entered the picture because even in season 10 and season 11, it wasn't like this team was a bad team. Like they were in playoffs almost every single split. They were 3rd place in season 10 Spring. I think they were 5th place in season 10 Summer, and they were playoff teams in season 11. And obviously they're winning the split in season 12 Spring. They're going to MSI. We'll have to see what their MSI performance is like. Who knows? Maybe they have like this little miracle run similar to like CLG 2016 because like this team is really popping off hard. But in terms of we've always talked about the LCS in the context of the top 3 teams, and TSM is for sure no longer in there. It's kind of just a matter of if they can at least get back into that consistent sort of playoff, somewhat competitive team that at the start of the split, on chance, still looks like they have a chance, and like it's not just like, oh, this team is like forgettable.
Yeah. The thing is, when we talked about the top 3 for so long, TSM was the first team mentioned all the time because they were the top team. Like Cloud9 and TL were definitely behind TSM, and that's clearly not the case anymore. So honestly, even though I don't think they're CLG yet, I could say they're definitely not TSM anymore, which is I realize that's a weird thing to say, but TSM is not TSM anymore. And I think this hurts them so much, man. Like, suing Doublelift does not help, like, that doesn't help get fans on your side. What was the play here?
Yeah,
you're basically suing Doublelift to shut up, right? Because it's about 300K, if I remember. Was that how much it was? It was 300K?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, that, you don't need 300K if you're TSM. So, like, because you signed a $210 million thing with FTX Like you don't need 300K. So
Cryptocurrency, Omega lol.
it's not about the money. It's about trying to get Doublelift to shut up, which basically proves his point that Reggie will bully you into shutting up.
Yeah.
So that didn't help your case whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of get into that like topic of the conversation, I think after this was after this article came out. I think it was the day after, when Doublelift was talking about it on his stream again. You know, he opened up this legal letter that he'd received from TSM's lawyers, which dude, when he was reading the letter and he was like, Bryce Blum, I was like, where do I know that name from? And like, that was the guy that was like always on Twitter, like 4 or 5 years ago, like talking about esports law. Like, I remember, like, and I was like,
him every once in a while.
yeah,
like,
but I remember like he started getting a name for himself back in like 2016, 2017, because I feel like that's when like LCS started ramping up and was like becoming a lot more serious in terms of like, because that was the point that they were sort of transitioning into franchising. I just remember seeing his name all the time. I was like, oh yeah, that guy, like he still exists. Like he actually represents like TSM and probably represents other teams in the LCS or other players, whatever. But when Doublelift read out this letter, I was just like, as you kind of just said, like this is just exactly like the Reggie move, like just literally bullying him to try to get him to shut up. And I think, you know, one of Doublelift's points was that like it's just not worth his time to potentially incur like, you know, a lawsuit or legal fees to continue this battle of like flaming TSM on stream. And, you know, it's just crazy. I mean, like to see how Doublelift was like one of the star players of TSM for many, many years to now calling out the organization on his stream, their owner, you know, threatening to sue him for like, what's the word? Disparagement. That's just fucking crazy. Like I can't even think of like a regular sports example where that's the case.
Well, and the one point that Doublelift makes in his video where he's going over the whatever, the article, and the document, I think, he makes the point that like disparagement isn't even like saying that it's wrong. Like he's just making like it would be defamation if he's saying it's wrong. So it's like he's kind of admitting that it's true what Doublelift said.
Yeah.
He's kind of admitting it by just saying disparagement, but regardless, that's fucked up. It's not a good way to get the people on your side. And yeah, I think that's just going to continue to hurt TSM for a long time to come as well. Now, as far as the Bryce thing, the Bryce Blunt, like, I don't really care. For me, I don't know how business is in the whole esports law area. I don't know if business is booming or not. I don't blame him whatsoever. You're a lawyer.
I wasn't blaming him. I just thought it was funny because I'm
not saying you are, but there are people that are upset at Bryce Blum look at Bryce differently.
He's just doing his job.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Lawyers get a lot of hate anyway, but they got to do the shitty stuff.
Now, the other people that I feel really bad for, who I have not lost in all this, is TSM fans. Because think about if you're a diehard TSM fan,
XD,
how hard it is. Yeah, XD. How hard it is to still cheer for this team, right? Because like, how should I put this? Well, okay, you know what? Here's what I'll do. I'll ask you, J&T. Imagine this was the New York Jets, and you find out that everyone in the organization is being abused by the CEO, and there's just a toxic environment. It has to be a lot more difficult for you to cheer for the New York Jets if you find out that, you know what I'm saying?
I know, yeah, I do.
Right? In the same case for me, if it was the Toronto Blue Jays and I found out that there was just a billion allegations of abuse from the CEO, and like everyone who stopped working at the Toronto Blue Jays never wanted to be in baseball again, I'd be crushed as a fan, and I wouldn't be watching baseball anymore. It'd be that simple. So I do feel bad for the diehard TSM fans out there. Yes, JNT XD. Because if you're them, like, you had your team and now it's like you kind of just don't for some of them, right? Some people will continue to cheer no matter what, but I have to feel like for a lot of them, it just sucks. And it's put a bad taste in their mouth for their favorite team.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, in terms of like the diehard fans that like would follow TSM LoL exclusively, and you know, obviously like they probably still like players like Bjergsen and Doublelift and probably supported them when they did go, you know, to different teams, mainly Team Liquid, because that's the only other team that they both went to. But you know, other than that, like, I guess I was kind of joking at the time, but like, why are you still a TSM fan at this point? Like, and I'm kind of half
people
kidding.
Like to stick with their team.
But dude, I get that, and I'm kind of like half joking, half serious. But we are literally talking about, and this has kind of been a known thing for at least a year now, or I guess, yeah, almost a year now, how terrible Reggie is as an owner in terms of treating his players, his staff, and now, after this article, his business. The team hasn't been successful. The team doesn't have, marquee players anymore. And don't get me wrong, I understand, supporting a struggling team or like supporting a team that, isn't doing as well as it once was. I mean, you just said it, like, I'm a New York Jets fan. Like, that team has been so terrible. It's like been one of the worst teams in the NFL for like the last decade. But just when you're a diehard fan, you're a diehard fan. But I definitely agree with you. Like, when it reaches a certain point where your team or your organization is like actually doing terrible things to its employees from the top down, like, that is something that you really just cannot support. And God forbid that actually happened to a team that I really like or really enjoy watching, like whether it was Cloud9 or the Jets or, anybody else. Like, I agree with you. Like, that would be something that would make me not a fan and make me not interested in the team and feel bad for those players and those fans, because
Yeah.
that is like a huge problem. And like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Hearing all the stories on social media about former TSM employees, like saying their piece about it and how either they were treated like shit or they weren't getting the pay that they deserved, or they were in this whole contractor versus employee situation where they're basically just kind of like getting abused in terms of like, like in terms of like legal ways, in terms of like getting benefits and getting, a proper pay and everything like that. Like, that's terrible. Like, I feel bad, and I have no remorse for, any of like Andy, or, Reginald, or like any of the TSM higher ups for doing these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's a
No,
bad look.
I
Like,
agree.
one thing that Doublelift said in his videos is like, this is something that's not good for the LCS as a product, because with TSM being a core piece of the LCS brand and the LCS identity, like, they have to try to hype up this team because it's like one of the cornerstones of like their whole league. Like, the league was pretty much built based off of TSM, followed closely by like teams like Cloud9 and Team Liquid. Like, that's what the league has been built around. And for one of the core pillars to just all of a sudden be kind of like a laughing stock of the league, where the team isn't as good as it once was, they don't contend for championships, and now ownership and upper management is treating its employees and its staff like shit. Like, how do you like get behind this team now? Like,
It's a good question to ask, and honestly, I don't know. So let's say the investigation that's being done, I think it's by Riot, or I don't know if it's Riot, LOL Esports, or if it's TSM doing an
well,
internal
TSM
investigation.
is
I don't
doing their
remember.
own one, and then Riot is also
Yeah.
doing one. So there's two going
Okay.
on.
Okay. Regardless, if the investigation is done and it comes out that yes, in fact, it is what we think, and he has been abusing staff and blah 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 blah, like, I don't know what you do as a league. I have no idea. Can you take a team away from someone? I don't know if you should even do that. Like, I actually have no idea. I don't think there's a good outcome. If anyone knows of a good outcome, or they have an idea of what should happen should he be found guilty of all the things in the investigation, please let us know in the comments, because I don't have a clue. I'm really not one for like canceling people. However, there are extreme examples, and this would be one of them. If it turns out that he's been abusing all of his staff, this would be one of them. So, really, really messed up stuff. And I guess well, I still do want to see what comes of the investigation, because it could change my opinion. Will it? Maybe, maybe not. But we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that before I decide to change my opinion on anything of that kind.
Yeah, I mean, last thing I'll say is, while it's a problem that TSM, as I said, one of the pillars of the LCS, isn't doing as well, both, in terms of results in the league and their outside appearance, I think they have some pretty clear solutions on the table with teams like 100 Thieves, who came into franchising, and while I don't think anyone expected to be contending for titles within their first split, like they were in the finals in the first split. Yeah, sure, they didn't have as great of like season 9, season 10, but like, this is a team that I think most people can agree on is like in that top 3, top 4 minimum in the LCS, and like, it feels like one of those like true LCS teams. Like, 100 Thieves doesn't feel like a team that's only been in the league for 4 years. It feels like a team that is like symbiotic with the LCS at this point. And then you have these young
Yeah.
guns in EG who, I mean, we were talking about before this split, like, are these guys like potentially like the superstars of the league? And we might as well just have seen it this split, with Danny, smurfing the whole playoffs, and JoJo, playing a lot better in the playoffs compared to his regular season and playing like a top mid in the league. like dumpstering people like Bjergsen, which is crazy to think about because not even like 2 months earlier, Bjergsen was like hardcore at playing Danny and Lock-in, or I guess 3 months in this case, and then it's like the complete 180 in that finals.
Things change quick in the LCS, man. Things do really change quick. We're going to get to some of those changes in just a second. Before we do, I want to remind people to hit the subscribe button if you're listening on YouTube. And for those that are new to the podcast, we do episodes every week, and they should continue to come out Monday nights, Tuesday mornings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any Anchor-supported platform. And we have to apologize because J&T and I can't do live streams for a little while. Maybe those will start up again in a month or two. Does that sound accurate, J&T?
Yeah, maybe we might have some backdoor
We'll have to wait and
that we
see.
can look in.
Yeah, we're trying to figure some things out, but for now, there's no live streams. We apologize for that, and to all of our regulars who are normally in the chat, big sorry. We're gonna see what we can do, anyways.
Yeah,
but for now, live streams. If there are live streams, I'll tweet out, or we'll remind people in a further episode or something. We will find a way of letting you guys know that we're doing live streams again.
Yeah, the TLDR is, if you look behind me, you can see that I'm in a different room, and I moved, and the internet's not as good. So
J&T moving again. What else is new?
Internet speed, Sag.
Anyways, let's get into the roster moves now, / rumors, because there's quite a bit of them. J&T and I, we take 1 week off, and, well, what do you know? Roster rumors, off season. Who would have guessed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
J&T, take it away.
Yep. I think the most important roster rumors that everyone knows already, but I think is most important to talk about is Cloud9. Because, like, let's be honest here, Cloud9 kind of bombed out of playoffs pretty hard. They looked pretty bad for the majority of playoffs. I mean, they only played 3 series, and they got shut on by 100 Thieves 3-0. They beat Golden Guardians 3-0, but, like, let's be honest, like, that should have happened and was expected anyways. And then EG gave them the smack-in 3-0, and I think pretty soon after they lost to EG, there was a lot of people wondering, if Cloud9 was going to make changes to this roster. Everyone kind of knew that, like, LS was the main reason why this roster was brought together in the first place. And even after him leaving way back when in week 2 of the LCS, or at the beginning of week 3, people thought, like, well, if this team fails, like, this team is probably going to blow up, right? Because LS isn't here anymore. And yeah, that's pretty much exactly what's happening. So
I remember saying that. I remember saying, like, I wonder what happens with this roster. And this was before we knew Summit was going to be trash. We didn't know that was going to happen because Summit was still popping off at the time. And I remember saying, like, are they going to be able to keep this guy? Because LS is probably the one that brought him over. Turns out that's not exactly the case. It sounds like C9 was the one to let him go. And there's been no buyouts for him or Winsome or Isles for that matter. Correct?
Yeah, Cloud9 parted way with all 3 of those players. Jack did specifically say in those postings that there's no buyout for any of the players. So just to make it as easy as possible to get them on a different team, because quite recently there's been a lot of controversy with buyouts and sort of teams holding players in contract prison because of these very large buyouts that have been created because a lot of these inflated contracts. We've already talked and said our 2 cents about those previously, but 0 buyout. One thing that is sort of rumored a little bit is that Summit is in talks to join Misfits over in the LEC, which is kind of interesting. But, drumroll please, the rumored Cloud9 roster is Fudge Top. He's a role swapping back. He's pulling a Bwippo. Role swap for 1 split, then go back. Blabber Jungle. Jensen, mid lane, making his return to Cloud9. Berserker.
So hype.
Berserker, he's still sticking around. And Sven, support. That has been like kind of like the spicy news. Sven role swapping to support.
That was rumored for a little while though, before the article came out, before that .esport. That was rumored that, because I think LS said something about that.
Yeah, LS said on his stream that if he was still with Cloud9, he would. I think this was at the time where Summit like still wasn't completely running it, and he said if he was still on Cloud9, he would have made the roster. Summit top, Blabber jungle, Fudge mid, Berserker AD, and have Sven role swap support.
Yeah.
So it's
really
basically
interesting.
Yeah. And with Summit no longer in the picture, it allows Fudge to go back top lane and Cloud9 bringing in Jensen. So
I think it's so hyped that Jensen's back on Cloud9. I think that was still the peak Jensen that we saw was Cloud9 Jensen. Obviously, Team Liquid fans will know that TL Jensen was pretty freaking beast also, especially at Worlds this past year. But I still think peak Jensen was with Cloud9, so I think that's pretty hype. I'm excited to see Sven play support as well. I think that's also pretty hype. Um, look, there's a lot of unknown here, right? Because yes, Fudge was great last year in the top lane, and he got good really quick in the top lane. So I'll remind people of that. However, you still don't really know when someone takes a break from a role, like how that's going to affect them. So there is still a little bit of a question mark there. There's a question mark of Jensen taking a break. There's a question mark of Sven taking a break. So even though this is really exciting, there's still a lot of question marks in this lineup, and I don't think it's absolute where they're going to finish. With that said, I still think they're going to Worlds. Am I crazy, J&T? Am I too hyped up, or what do you think?
Well, I guess what I would say to that is if Cloud9's going to Worlds, what team's not going to Worlds? Because Cloud9 was fourth, and the top three would then be EG, 100 Thieves, TL.
So I would go TL, EG, and C9, and I would actually have 100 Thieves not making it.
Damn. That's crazy.
I know, crazy, right? I know.
I don't even think that. I don't think that that's crazy.
You don't think that that's crazy?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I thought maybe I still might get some flack for that. But the thing is, okay, so let's start with this. I'm not crazy that this could be a Worlds roster, right?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a Worlds-worthy roster.
Right, and by that logic, one of those other teams has to not make it, and I'm going with 100 Thieves because EG just wiped the floor by sweeping everyone. How can I go against EG? And then TL has that roster, which I told you a million times. Like, how can I not have faith in that roster? Well, what's left over is 100 Thieves, who I haven't had faith in their bot lane. They've been very on and off. And Abadoge's been very on and off. You know, I only have faith in 2 of the 5 players from 100 Thieves, even though I still think that team is good. You're going to have what looks like 4 good teams, 4 Worlds quality teams come summer. So we'll see. I might be wrong. Maybe Cloud9 isn't that good, and maybe it's still the same top 3, but only time will tell.
Yeah, like, just to go back to, like, the Jensen point real quick, like, that was what was crazy to me as, like, a Cloud9 fan. Like, when, after their Worlds run, like, Jensen was clearly the best player on that team, like, by a wide margin. It was, like, Jensen, then probably Licorice, then, like, Sven Skaren, then, like, their bot lane. But to hear, like, that Jensen was basically being traded to Team Liquid after that season that they just had was just, like, mind-boggling to me. And it was just, like, it was pretty sad because, like, Cloud9 was looking like they were going to be, like, back at the top and, like, stay at the top because of their sort of turnaround at the end of that summer split where, like, they went from 10th place to 2nd place, go to World semifinalists, and then, you know, it sort of took some time. They brought in Niski, and then, like, they kind of made their return to the top in, like, season 10 and 11, winning in spring both splits there. But I'm hyped because I've always thought that Jensen was, you know, to me, the way that I saw it, maybe I'm a little bit biased because I was a Cloud9 fan. I kind of saw Jensen and Bjergsen as a 1A, 1B type mid laners. But Bjergsen inevitably had the edge almost every single time that they played. Like, I can't recall, like, the only times that Jensen beat Bjergsen in best of 5s were in, like, that season 8 summer playoffs. I think every other best of 5 that TSM and Cloud9 ever played, TSM won, except for those last 2 at the end of summer season 8. I mean, I usually am pretty good at remembering these things, but I can't recall a best of 5 that Jensen actually beat Bjergsen that didn't include those last 2 in the summer when he was on Cloud9. I'm saying, not ever.
Yeah, but, the thing is, like, there was always the discussion about Jensen versus Bjergsen, and the reason why you could hype it up is because they were both good enough to have a rivalry, right? Now, still, I think 99% of people would come out and still say that Bjergsen was the better player. There's no doubt there. But to your point, 1A and 1B, because Jensen was not far behind. It just happened to be that Bjergsen got the best of him every time because he was slightly better. It's that simple.
Yeah. With the Sven role swap to support thing, I know, like, history says that players role swapping to support usually works out better than the majority of other role swaps because I think people view support as a super macro oriented role and not very, you know, micro oriented, just in terms of, like, for example, support players switching to jungle or mid. like they gotta gain some hands to be able to play that role at the top of their respective region. And from everything that I've sort of heard about Sven on streams, whether that's from players, whether it was from LS, is that Sven has always been like a really good fill player. That's like one thing people say in high elo solo queue, that whenever Sven is filled on their team, it's always like a sigh of relief that he's the guy getting filled and not like some random like solo queue player getting filled. And I think there was a thing on Reddit. I want to say it was like 2 weeks ago that Sven had been like spamming support on his eWest account. So like that kind of like, it was really no surprise when this was sort of not announced, but this article came out with the roster rumors about Cloud9. So this is like a role swap that I have some decent confidence in, just based off of everything that I've heard about Sven and his proficiency in other roles, and the fact that he's also a bot laner, because he doesn't have to learn anything about these matchups. Like he knows how all these matchups works. Like so, like that's something you can just completely eliminate right off the bat. And presumably, if you're a good fill player, you should just be able to pick up things, a lot quicker than your other person who might be role swapping to support.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I'm thinking. I will say though that the fact that he's a bot laner, I have more confidence in him. The fact that he was a bot laner more than he's a good fill player. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, that's still encouraging. But I don't really care much about solo queue, unless I guess maybe it was in Champions queue, which is kind of
and that as well.
At this point, it's kind of an XD at this point. But still, though, like if people were saying that he was a good fill player in Champions queue, that gives me more confidence than he was a good fill player in solo queue, because I don't really put a lot of stake in solo queue, honestly. But anyways, last thing I want to say on Cloud9, because we've gone on about them for a little while, is the fact that they're letting go of Winsome and Isles is very telling to me, because those guys did not take up import slots. So that to me doesn't say like, oh, we don't think they're ready. We don't think they're going to be ready anytime soon, so we're letting them go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only other observation that I had there. Is like, if they thought Isles or Winsome were close, they would have held on to him. But I don't think they do think that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the last thing I got.
Yeah, I mean, I was never high on Winsome, like apart from like a 2 to 3 week stretch we had in the middle of the season where Cloud9, ended up being the number one team. And then Isles, we really only got to see him in 2 best of 5s, the one against Golden Guardians and the one against EG. And, at the very best, he beat Golden Guardians and got shit stomped by EG. And I know that's like not a lot of data, but like you can't be getting shit stomped.
I don't
if you
have
want to
any,
be on this team in the future.
I don't have any opinion because, like you said, we didn't see much out of him. And when we did see him join, it was when Cloud9 is in free fall. So,
yeah,
whatever. The only thing I could say is clearly Cloud9 didn't have faith in him to keep him for longer. So that's all I got. Let's move on to the TSM stuff, JNT. What's the TSM roster supposed to look like?
Yeah, so this is all official. TSM did announce all of these moves that they've made already. So their roster is as follows. Huni top lane, Spica jungle, Maple mid lane, former PSG Talon mid laner. I think that's what the majority of people would know him from. If you're an OG League fan, you know him from his time on Flash Wolves or in the LMS. Tactical bot lane, and then support Shenyi / Mia or Maya. I think it's just Mia. I don't know exactly.
I think it's Mia.
But he was a player who they just signed this in between spring and summer to compete for the starting spot against Shenyi. I thought that was really interesting, just right off the bat, that first of all that they were keeping Shenyi, and second of all that they're making him compete for the spot.
Yeah,
because I feel like if you kept him, you would have just been starting him, not making him compete for the starting spot.
It was weird. So stop me if I'm crazy here, but did they not announce like it was Mia, and then later on they were like, "Oh, by the way, these two are going to be fighting for the spot"? Is it just me, or did it not go down like that?
Well, I think they announced him for Academy, but then just kind of threw in that he was going to also compete for the starting spot.
Oh,
I don't remember.
They signed Mia. Maybe I'll go to TSM while we're talking about it. And I thought they announced him, and then later on we're like, "Oh, they're fighting for the spot." Like, oh, that's different than. But anyways, so here's the thing. Here's the crazy thing about this roster is that for, I don't even know, like maybe the whole second half of Spring Split, we continued to talk about how TSM needs to blow up this roster and it needs to look different. It doesn't look that different. Now, don't get me wrong. I am hype for Maple, but let's be honest, the roster doesn't look all that different, and that's kind of like Okay, they started playing better towards the end of spring to be more fair. But still, though, it's not very encouraging, is it?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that like for the TSM haters, they kind of brought up initially the fact that Maple, apart from his time on PSG Talon, wasn't a really good mid laner outside of the LMS slash the PCS. His time over in the LPL, I don't remember the teams he was on. They'll come to me maybe, but he wasn't really a great mid laner in the LPL. That doesn't necessarily bode well in terms of his performances, over in another major region, because for the most part, people consider the PCS a minor region, despite their number one seed often performing quite well at international events. And the LMS was on like a huge decline in like season 7 and 8. So I don't think there's a ton of people that are thinking that Maple is just going to jump into this team and suddenly like make them a much better team. It feels like this is kind of a move to bring in a veteran mid laner who knows what he's doing, as opposed to Kaido, who, not to say that he didn't know what he was doing, but like this was his first time on like a major team with significant playing time. Like, sure, he was like an LDL mid laner, and similar to Shenyi, he was on like FPX, and although he did start about 5 games on the main roster, like that's not a lot of competitive experience, and it makes a lot of sense that they're bringing in someone to compete against him for the starting spot. But like you said, like how much better did this roster really get?
Yeah, that's the worry, right? Especially for TSM fans, because they did just finish ninth, and that's being generous. That's giving them the tiebreaker to say they finished ninth, because they finished 10th.
Yeah,
So
well, technically they did have the tiebreaker because they had 2-0 head over Immortals.
yeah, but I mean, as far as your record is concerned, you're
Yeah,
still last. I mean, that's some copium to me. That you have the tiebreaker. Yeah, officially, but like, ain't nobody flexing. Hey, I finished ninth because the tiebreaker. No one's flexing that. But yeah, no, it honestly, I would be worried as a TSM fan, because we saw these guys have not so great of splits, right? Spica did not look very good. Tactical did not look very good. And yes, you could chalk it up to a bad environment and so on and so forth, but who's to say that the environment's going to get much better just because you got rid of Kaiduo?
yeah. I think for anything, like in Spring Split, there was less pressure because you knew you had that entire Spring Split to work towards Summer Split, and now it's actually crunch time. Like, presumably TSM within their own organization has set expectations that they should be a playoff team and should contend for Worlds. And from the outside looking in, I don't have a lot of faith when you finish ninth place.
So
And
do you
like we
think
said,
they'll
that's
finish
being
better?
generous. Yeah, I think
Do you
they'll
think
finish better than ninth place, but does I
yeah.
think that this propels them into like top 4 contention with presumably
No.
EG, 100 Thieves, Cloud9, and Team Liquid? Not even a chance. Like, I probably
I
put this
don't know
team
of
in like,
anyone who's putting them top four. I don't know of anyone who's like, oh yeah, this team's way
yeah,
better now because Maple.
I put them in the FlyQuest Golden Guardians category. That's where I put them,
Mm.
like 5th, 6th, 7th.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to like wait to see how all the rosters finish off and whatnot, because I'm sure we'll do an episode on that. Off the top of my head, without much thought, I'd probably put them sixth, but we'll have to wait and see, because yeah, we don't know what the rosters are going to look like, right? Anything else on TSM, or should we go next?
I guess last thing I'll say, I did say that they parted ways with Kaiduo. One thing that TSM did
Yes.
say, which was like kind of good guy TSM, but this was also before all this other shit came out, was that he can't go back to China because of COVID, or at least I don't know if he can't go back or he's just choosing to stay in NA, and like TSM is gonna like pay for him to stay basically. So good guy TSM, but then this other shit came out. So
J&T, you just reminded me. I don't even think this is what you were trying to do, but you just reminded me. Remember in the one episode where they got rid of Peter Zhang, and I was like, take your pick. Who's going next? Do you remember who you said?
did I say Kaido?
You did. You did.
I'm a beast.
Now, the thing is, at the time, like, I know that's not some crazy hot take, but at the time, we thought they were getting rid of a bunch of people, right? So, like, it could have been Shenyi, it could have been Kaido. My pick was Chowie, because I thought if they were getting rid of what rumored at the time was that they were going to be getting rid of the LPL players. So, my thought was, well, the reason why you got Chowie in the first place was because you wanted someone who spoke Mandarin. So, I thought Chowie would be the guy to go, but no word on that as of yet. So, got to give J&T the props on that one. J&T called it.
I called it. I'm a beast.
Okay, Immortals next. The roster is supposed to be Revenge. Question mark in the jungle. We don't know yet. We know that we know that Xerxes is going back to Europe. Power of Evil still sticking around mid lane. Lost is the rumor to be going in the AD carry position, and then Ignar, that has been announced. Ignar to be on Immortals, obviously reuniting Power of Evil with Ignar. J&T, thoughts?
Yeah, I guess at this point they need to sign Wild Turtle, buy out Santorin from TL, and call up solo, and then they'll just be playing 2020
Yeah,
FlyQuest, and maybe they'll be a decent team because like Immortals.
but
I
they're
think
getting rid of Wild Turtle though.
yeah, but I mean they haven't announced it yet, so that's all
True,
I'm saying.
true,
Like
that's true.
this was a team that I think I picked to sort of be like that sixth place team that could like I think at the start of the year we kind of identified the top 5 quote unquote with we had TSM in there. They're obviously out of that at this point. But I personally had Immortals as like that sixth place team who could compete for playoffs and is like, oh, like this team actually has like some decent potential. Revenge improves, Cersei continues to play well. Power of Evil like comes in, does his normal Power of Evil thing and like plays pretty well. Wild Turtle hadn't been too bad lately, and Destiny he was kind of like a big question mark. But like, dude, like this roster kind of fell flat on its face. It really never ended up like looking how I thought it was going to be because Revenge really didn't improve. He had like for every one good game, he had 3 bad games. Xerxes was actually worse, this year than he was last year entirely. Power of Evil was kind of doing his normal Power of Evil thing, but with the rest of the team losing so hard on the map, Power of Evil doesn't really have a huge early game impact because that's not the kind of style that he plays. And the bot lane was complete trash. So while we do talk about TSM as like a last place team, like dude, Immortals was tied for last with them as well. Like they were 4-14. Like is that what their record was? Or 5-13, wasn't it? Pretty sure it
Yeah,
was.
I think it was
Yeah,
5.
it was
5
5-13. But I remember at one point they
Okay.
were 4-4, and then they lost 7 games in a row in the middle of the split before like winning 1 game in week 8 or week 9. And while I do think that getting Lost and Ignar as their bot lane potentially, Ignar confirmed, Lost rumored, I think that is for sure an upgrade. But with
Yep.
Xerxes leaving the team and Ignar taking up an import slot, you have to find a native and a jungler to put on this team. And there's not currently one out there that is really LCS level at this point. Like, there's not one that at least is coming to mind where like, oh, pick up this guy, he's LCS level, and you'll be good. Because at this point, I think you're probably going to be going with like an older veteran who isn't at LCS level, or you're going to be throwing in some like rookie academy player with like maybe high potential, but that's going to like be pretty difficult to integrate into your roster when this is summer split and not spring split.
I didn't put a lot of thought into who could be the jungler. The only guy I could think of was they played Chad for 1 game at the end of the split, right?
Yeah.
Immortals. Don't know enough about him to really have an opinion there. Maybe it's Chad, but if it is, I don't have anything to say on that.
Yeah, but like
Haven't watched
there's
enough Academy
no
to have an opinion.
there's no LCS. I think all the LCS junglers are staying the same for the most. Like I don't think there's a single jungle change other than Immortals.
And we've talked about this, but like most of the LCS teams are pretty happy with their jungle
Yeah,
position.
I
right? It's
think
definitely
jungle's the
strong in
strongest role
LCS right now.
in the league.
Yeah,
Like you look at the
no doubt.
junglers that we have in our region: Blabber, good; Santorin, good; Inspired, good; Closer, good; Jose Diodo, good. Who else am I missing? Like, Pride Soccer. Like I actually think he's pretty decent for his first.
I think Pride
split
Soccer's good.
that we saw. River, I forgot about River. River, good. Like the only
The
teams
junglers are good.
that have bad junglers were Immortals last split and CLG with contracts, who was like super coin flip. Other than that, junglers are good in this league, and there's not any like you're basically having to throw an academy jungler into this roster, and with jungle being one of the strongest roles, it doesn't give me a lot of faith with this team. And like you said, I think right at the beginning, keeping Revenge just seems super troll. Like I don't know why he's still on this team.
Yeah, I am surprised by that. Honestly, I am. But
Yeah.
I guess maybe they just didn't have any other options. It
Uh,
might be that simple.
That's fair.
Because there are other teams that need top laners right now, and then I guess that brings us to our next team, Dignitas, who they're rumored to stay the same except for the top lane, right? Because
Yep.
they've parted ways with Fake God, but no idea who could be replacing yet. But
Yeah.
there's another team that needs a top laner, and maybe that's why Immortals is keeping Revenge, right? Because maybe there's just not enough top laners to go around.
Bold prediction.
It better
Darshan
not be
to
okay. I was
Dignitas.
gonna say it better not be the guys that are on my list here.
Oh, did you have a list? Oh.
I have 2 guys. I didn't really put a lot of thought into this, but I don't think 100 Thieves needs Tenacity the way Sunday's playing. So
Yeah,
I
maybe.
feel like there should be some teams going after Tenacity. The other guy is Dokla. I feel like there should be some teams going after Dokla if CLG is to not use him. Remember, CLG could potentially replace Jenkins, but nothing that we've heard of yet. But that's another guy who has played in the LCS and has been hard grinding Champions Queue when it was available. RIP Champions Queue. We'll see you in a few weeks. So yeah, those were the only two names that came to mind. I guess Solo maybe, but I still don't really know what's going on with Solo. Haven't heard from him in forever. So yeah, I don't got any more names. Is there anybody that I should have mentioned?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, the reason why I say Darshan is Dignitas had one clear, glaring hole of a problem, which was Fake God's inability to just have a normal lane because he was just getting shit on all the time. And, like, I think we came into the split like with a lot of question marks around this team because we thought Blue was going to be dog shit. We didn't know how Biofrost was going to look because he didn't look good in his last split in TSM. We were wondering if Neo was going to be good without Aphromoo, and we thought Fake God like what's Fake God's threshold of like, is he going to be normal top laner or is he just going to shit on all the time? But it turned out to be that like Blue's actually good. Biofrost is also actually good, but Fake God was getting shit on. But Fake God was getting shit on even harder than he was all of last year. And
continue to say. Sorry, I cut you off. You can finish your thought.
Whatever. Fake God's getting shit on, and Darshan is like the guy who doesn't get shit on. Like, he's the guy who plays the tank matchups. He goes neutral and lane, and he is the utility of the team. Like, I know, like towards the earlier parts of his LCS career, Darshan was he was a what's the word I'm looking for? He was like a bruiser kind of player. Like he definitely played, I think, more of like the mechanically intensive type of champions back in like season 4, 5, 6. But throughout his LCS career, he did kind of turn into like a tank utility player, and I feel like that's what this team needs because they just need a stable top laner. Let River do the hard lifting, let Biofrost do the macro, and let Neo and Blue pump out the damage. Like, it's simple math here.
I agree. It helps to have a veteran. And on the Biofrost point, all I was saying is that I'm going to stand by that he was the best support in spring. Don't at me, Core JJ fans, even though I love Core JJ myself, I still think Biofrost actually had the better split. As far as top laners go, I know it's not going to be Lorlo because they wouldn't play the fucking guy even when they had him signed.
Dude,
so
I still think that guy could play LCS. I would if I was Immortals, like if I was Immortals GM, I'd pull up Lorlo right now on that team.
Yeah. But
love you, Lorlo.
Don't think that's happening. I'm pretty sure Viper's taking a break as well. I don't know what other top laners are available.
Stinks.
There's high demand for top laners on some of these LCS teams, and there's just not enough to go around. So, anyways, we'll wait and see what Dignitas does with their top lane. I'm excited because I think that team can be a lot better than where they placed if they just get a good top laner. Next up is Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians, they're looking to stay mostly the same with Licorice, Pride Stalker, Ablaze Olive, and Olay, but their AD carry is the question mark right now because Immortals is rumored to be getting lost. And so, J&T, I guess I'll ask you first. Who do you think they could go after for AD carries? Do you have anyone in mind?
For whatever reason, I was like, oh, they're going to have to get NA AD carry, but they don't have to, right? Because, like, Olay, he's a resident now, right? I think he is.
No, I don't think so.
He's not?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I mean, he's been in the league since season 7, so I figured he was a resident.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I can check though. I'll check real quick.
Yeah.
I'll see if he has a resident.
But I originally was like, oh yeah, like the team's gonna have to get an NA resident, so it's probably gonna be like a guy who's gonna be average at best. I was like, wait a minute, they can get an import, and I haven't even thought about like what import AD carries they could get. So honestly, like I haven't given a whole lot of thought to it. But I mean, Golden Guardians was another team that actually had a lot of potential in Spring Split, but they definitely did struggle when it came to like the mid and late game of closing out their early game leads that they would pretty much accrue almost every game. Like they were one of the best early game teams in the league throughout the entire year. They were like really like way up in first place after the first couple weeks, but that was because of like a little bit of the Smite top stuff. But like they were still a really good early game team. They picked up some wins against some pretty good teams. Like I remember they beat TL in one game. They beat 100 Thieves in a game. But unfortunately, like these are one of the teams that was like also losing to some of the bottom teams. But I think it's important to be able to beat the top teams. Like when you're in like a clutch gaming situation where you can beat everybody below you but can never beat anybody above you, like that doesn't really like bode well for future success when you can never get over the hump. And at least Golden Guardians has shown that they can get over that hump and they can play good games against top teams. Because even in their like semifinals or losers semifinals against Cloud9, like they were still having successful early games. And yeah, that was when Cloud9 wasn't at their best, but they were still like,
TNT, I have the results.
okay, but like, well, my point is like, this team is actually decent. This is another team that I'm kind of high on. I think I've been high on. Unfortunately for my boy Blaze Olive, he had like a really shit year. Maybe he can bounce back. But if they get a good AD, like this, like I said, could be Golden Guardians FlyQuest territory. That's like 5, 6, 7 range.
So the results are in, and Ole is a non-resident at the moment. Now, that doesn't mean he can't get his green card, and then they could look for it, because that's totally possible. But as of right now, as of now that we know he's a non-resident, so he would take up an import slot, and
That's
they would need
crazy.
to go for an NA AD carry, which they still have Stixay, right?
Well, he's a coach though now.
I thought he was playing Academy.
No, he's a positional coach.
Oh, because I'm pretty sure he's on their Academy roster.
I thought Stixay was going to be on this team in Spring Split
Yeah,
because I thought they were going to keep Licorice, Ablaze Olive, Stixay, and get rid of Chime / who the fuck was the other guy? What was his name even? The guy from Argentina.
Newbie?
Yeah, Newbie. Oh, fucking that guy was noob.
What the fuck was his name, you say?
Dude, yeah, he was trash. But like, dude, I thought those three were going to be on the team, and then they got rid of Stixay and they picked up Lost too. I don't know. I'm higher on Lost than most people. I think he was actually decent.
And Violet are on the Golden Guardians Academy roster, which on this website,
I swear to God, he was
wiki,
coaching.
It's the LOL fandom thing. Well, hold on. On the LOL fandom wiki thing, if you're on this roster, that means you just played one game. So it's possible that like Violet was sick with COVID and Stixay just played a game. I don't know. I have no idea. But he is on this roster. Stixay is not as a coach, as a bot laner. He's on the thing. So Acadian's the guy with the little whistle, the coach emblem. So
Yeah, I mean, he also has that on like the LoL fandom thing. Stixay, he has the little whistle.
yeah, like I said, that might just mean that he played only one game or
Yeah,
something. It
maybe.
could be that the other guy had COVID or whatever, or what for some reason had to miss a game or something. So, but anyways, the point is, Stixay could probably still fit right back into the roster and do a serviceable job. So
Maybe.
that's the only guy I got in mind. I don't know who else is available. I guess Turtle and Arrow are now available, but I don't think. I guess Arrow would be import, right?
Maybe Turtle, like maybe you grab Turtle for like Academy / backup if whoever you get as your main roster AD is like not very good. You could at least put Turtle in there.
Mm-hmm.
Turtle feels like the kind of player who will play like shit on bad teams, but will play good on good teams. Like he plays to the level of performance of his team, like regardless. Like if he's on a first place team, he's playing like a top ADC, and if he's playing on a last place team, he's playing like a bottom tier ADC, like just doing some classic Turtle moments.
Yeah. But anyways, that's all the roster rumors or changes so far. All the other teams, EG 100, TL Fly, and CLG have not made any changes yet. And so I ask you, J&T, are you surprised by no changes on some of these squads?
Well, CLG was 8th place last split, and they had
they're developmental.
Yeah, their bot lane is, but they have a couple of guys on the team who have been in LCS for a good little bit now and have not been performing very well. I'm looking at you, Palafox.
And contracts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would keep contracts just because like the upside still is there.
He had a better second half, but dude, he definitely ran it down in the first half. That was some of the worst jungling we've seen in the LCS. But yeah, he did start to look better as time went on. But again, it all comes down to who else is available, right? Like it's not as simple as just get a better mid, because North America has not had a good history of having good mid laners, at least not import ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think CLG is in a spot where like they should know that they can't contend for Worlds at this point, and they should do everything in their power to try to identify what their team is going to look like for next year. And definitely Luger is going to be part of that, presumably with Poom as well, because I thought that Luger and Poom were
most likely
the best two players on that team. And if I was CLG, like I wouldn't want to put in extra resources to this roster when we could be using that for next year. So for example, like my point with that is like, if the only replacements for Palafox were more expensive replacements, I would just rather them save that money and use that to buy potentially an even better player for next year. Because
when you're ready to make a Worlds push.
And not even a world, like everyone says that like their goal is to make Worlds, but like at a certain point, like there's only 3 teams that makes Worlds, and
but that's what you strive for.
You strive for that, but like you should be setting realistic goals of like being a top 6 team, and I think that CLG potentially next year could be a top 6 team if if they had the money to do so and they kept Luger and Poom, and they performed similar to that of Spring Split, I think this team could be all right.
Yeah.
But we would need some changes, roster changes, but I don't see the point in pouring resources into this team for this split.
Fair enough. Okay, anything else, or should we move on to the MSI stuff?
Yes, MSI.
MSI,
Whoa.
starting in a couple of hours, man.
True, actually, yeah.
It is underway in like 2.5 hours from when we are recording this. Okay, I don't have much to say on all the groups, so I mostly have just things to say on EG. So let's just get our predictions out of the way. I don't know if you got a graphic or whatever you're doing over there.
Are we going to go group by group, or are we just going to talk about MSI? Like,
we could go group by group for the predictions.
Okay, should we do that first?
Yeah, let's do that. Group A.
Okay, Group A. We got T1, Detonation Focus Me, Saigon Buffalo, and Team A's. Ace.
Yeah, that's how I got it.
Oh, in that order?
So,
I just put the things in that. That was how they were like ranked in like the way the group draw went.
Yeah, well, I mean, usually it goes that way because they pull the A seeds first, right?
Yeah.
Pool one rather first.
Yeah.
So yeah, honestly, I'll just get through it. Like I pretty much everything is the way it's supposed to go for all of my groups. I'll just admit it now. Like T1 is the favorite of the tournament, and well, DFM, everybody else in that group is just a minor region. So how can I predict them ahead of T1? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
DFM has some recognizable names as well, right? I think they still have Utapon. They have, is it Evie or Evi? I just remember that was the Urgot guy.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all I really remember. And oh wait,
he's been on the team for a long time now.
Don't tell me the jungler's name. Oh, I'm blanking on it. It's Steel.
Yeah.
Steel. Yes.
With an A, not two E's, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember much of like his champion pool or anything like that, but I do remember him. And then they got a different mid, I think. I don't know the mid.
I remember. I'm gonna take credit for this because I said back when we were talking about Arya. I don't even know if it was MSI 2021 or Worlds 2021, but I was predicting that Arya was going to be on an LCK team next year. He was on KT Rolster. They have a new mid, Yarong. He's also Korean, so I'm going to click on his name real quick, but presumably he was an LCK Academy player, or at the very least LCK. I actually remember, I looked this up. He was on Fred at Brion's Challengers team. Like the LCK is like LCK Challengers. He was on a Bro Challengers. I mean, I don't know. That doesn't mean anything to me because I have no clue like how good that academy team was or whatever. But LCK Academy mid is like decent mid laner. Like that's nothing to like just scoff at.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean the only other thing I have to say is like I think I mentioned this before. Saigon Buffalo. They're not actually the number one seed from Vietnam. Gigabyte Marines were, and they were like there's a scheduling conflict between. Like some Vietnamese, like the Vietnamese games where like their league team is playing in. So they ended up sending Saigon Buffalo, who is the second place team. Like I said, I have no clue who's even on this team. Like I looked at their team, and I was like, I can't name a single one of these players. I've never seen them before. But I think the VCS is like, it's not a region that you can just completely like look past. Like I think there are regions that you can just kind of ignore. Unfortunately, I'll name them out. Unfortunately, but like OS. Brazil and Turkey, like those aren't really regions that really do anything at Worlds or at international events at all.
Turkey was pretty good at the one Worlds where like they had Armut, and that one year they were pretty beast.
I mean, they didn't, I guess, but like
they were noticeably better than some of the other smaller regions. But you gotta be careful shitting on OS when NA has to play them 4 times.
I mean, I mean that in relative terms to like the VCS and like the LJL because like those are teams that are actually like taking games off of good teams at international events. So what I would say is I think if the Gigabyte Marines were there, I probably would have put them ahead of Detonation Focus Me. But since it's the second tier team, and honestly I don't know a single thing about them, I put DFM ahead of them. So I do have it in this order as well: T1, DFM, Saigon Buffalo, and A's. Similar to Saigon Buffalo, I have no fucking clue who any of these players on Team A's are.
Yeah, same.
Like,
okay, let's go Group B then.
Not a single clue.
Group B, I got RNG, then PSG, then the Wildcats, and then Red Canids. Yeah, again, I don't really know much about the smaller regions. I do know that PSG has some guys that I recognize. That team's pretty good. Hanabi was kind of a beast for. I don't even think it was this Worlds that passed. It was the prior one, right?
Well,
I think it was.
he was at Worlds 2020 and MSI 2021 and Worlds 2021.
Yeah, he's kind of a beast, honestly. I think he's pretty good. Unified's pretty good, and Kaiwing's pretty good. They've all shown signs of actually holding their own on the world stage. So I still respect this team, and I think they're kind of like the most underrated team, I would say, in the tournament. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're gonna go and win it, but I think when I was looking at like the odds or whatever for like who should win the tournament, I think they were the most underrated at like 65-1 or something like that. And I'm like, if they played this tournament 65 times, I could see them winning it once.
Yeah, and similar to DFM, in the case that they have Korean players from mid jungle that were originally brought over from the LCK Academy scene. PSG Talent has done the same thing once again. They brought over two players from Nongshim's Academy team, Juhan and Bei. Like they played together. Like they're a mid jungle duo. They've been playing together for like 2 years now. So bringing them into an already good team, as you mentioned, with Hanabi, Unified, and Kaiwing, which are all like three really good players just individually. Like their bot lane was kind of wrecking people at Worlds. Well, they were wrecking people at MSI when Doggo was in and not Unified, but Doggo and Kaiwing. And then they were also wrecking people at Worlds 2021 and even Worlds 2020 when that team, I think they didn't beat Damwon, but they beat JDG in a best of one in one of those games. But PSG, similar to DFM, is like always is one of those teams that you got to look out for at these events. And even at the previous MSI, they went to semifinals and took RNG to 5 games. So we're going to see that a bit of a rematch there. Best of ones, different from best of fives, obviously. But in terms of the order of where I would place these teams, it is in the order that you do see on screen: RNG, PSG, Istanbul Wildcats, or I guess the Fast Pay Wildcats, and the Red Canids. I'm mainly basing my opinions off of the Wildcats and the Red Canids from when we saw them at MSI 2021 in the case of the Wildcats and Worlds 2021 in the case of the Red Canids. The main things that I remember from the Red Canids, the lineup is pretty similar, but I thought that they were one of the worst teams at Worlds in terms of what we saw at the play-in stage. If my memory serves me correct, they were in the group with LNG and Hanwha, and it's pretty difficult to look good against those teams because LNG and Hanwha were like they were from the LPL and the LCK.
Yeah,
and
4th seed out of the 2 best regions in the world.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you're gonna get shit on probably no matter what. But they finished lower than Peace, who was like the OS team, and I thought that team was also pretty dog shit. Yeah. So I don't really have any expectations for this team. Whereas the Istanbul Wildcats, actually thought this team wasn't too bad when we saw them at MSI 2021. Even though they finished last in their group at 1-5, they also had some really close games up against the tougher teams in their group. I remember that they had 2 really, really close games against Mad Lions, both which they could have won. I don't remember who the other game they played against was. It was against PSG. They almost beat them as well. So, like, there was a world where this team could have actually made it out of MSI groups from last year, going 4-2. I just remember their ADC Holy Phoenix is like a beast. He's like the carry player on that team. He was playing a lot of Samira when like Samira was like kind of falling out of the meta when season 11 started. So I just remember that guy's a beast, and like I have a lot more faith in them as like an underdog team than the Red Canids because they actually played some pretty good games against like some tough opponents.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say, even though T1's the obvious favorite for this tournament, don't sleep on RNG. Last year, people kind of slept on RNG, saying that Damwon was going to win it all, and what do you know? RNG kind of proved people wrong there. So, and they're running back, I believe, is it all of the same players, or was Bin not there last year at this time?
Bin wasn't there last year.
Okay, so that's
they still had Jahu top. Now he's back to mid.
Oh, was he top? I thought that they had swapped him back mid at that point. I guess they hadn't yet.
Nope. He played top all last year.
Oh, who the hell was their mid?
It was Cryan.
It was Cryan.
Any player.
Okay. Yes. This is coming back to me now. Yeah.
Also, looking at it again, I think the Wildcats had the same exact roster.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they have the same roster. But yeah, Holy Phoenix is a beast. That guy's good.
Anyways, what I do remember about this time last year was, first of all, I remember Rumble Jungle was hella meta, and there was a lot of hype behind Wei. And Wei still had a good tournament, but he didn't have like there was a lot of hype around him for MSI last year, and so I'm kind of hoping that he has a better tournament this MSI than last year's. Even though I mean he was still good and they still won the tournament and whatnot. I want to see the hype resurgence for Wei because he's supposed to be an absolute monster, and I don't think he completely delivered last MSI. So hopefully we see some of that. The rest of the roster is also beast for what it's worth, but that's no hot take and no surprise.
Yeah, I mean the rest of the roster is what RNG's been running for quite some time now.
Yeah. Hey, let's go to Group C now.
Yep, Group C, the banger group, the group that everybody cares about because it's got NA, EU, and OS. The storylines are never ending here. We have G2, EG, and Order. This group is going to be spicy, I think, mainly because I feel like there's now like one of the things like you see like stuff pop up on Reddit every time, like every other week or every other month or every other year about like somebody just venting or talking about some topic that's always getting talked about. And it feels like one of those topics now is like NA and EU never even play each other anymore. Like I think there's been no best of 5 between NA and EU since like MSI 2019 with the TLG2 finals. And like they've only played each other like a handful of times in MSI and Worlds and stuff like that. And me personally, like I have never really bought into the whole NA versus EU meme. But I do understand where people are coming from when they say that.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean, like, you haven't bought into the meme? I don't get it.
Or I guess not the meme, but the rivalry. Like, I don't care about it. Like, I don't care that.
Really?
Like,
I fucking do.
I don't know. Like,
I am bought in.
I don't really care about it. But I do. I see where people are coming from when this is something that a lot of people do care about. And that the fact that these two regions have played, like, minimal games against each other in, like, the last 3 or 4 years. So I am excited that we are going to maybe get some clarity to this whole thing because I think going into it, while both G2 and EG might not have been the best teams in their region at the start or even in the middle, but at the end, I think we can definitively say that these two teams were the best in their region, and they're both going to MSI on like this really big upswing of like a lot of confidence. All their players are playing well. All their players are like playing really, really well. Like players like Danny and Inspired are like looking really, really solid. All of G2 is looking really, really good. Yeah, like Flackhead and Targamas have actually turned out to be what everyone thought they were going to be in this like super hype bot lane. Maybe even earlier than people thought they would. Similar to EG, like people knew that Jojo Pum was going to be pretty good, but they didn't think that he would reach that part like only one split into his career. Danny is clearly a beast.
People thought that he would be good, but they didn't think he would be that good. He literally styled the whole damn weekend for LCS finals. But I think you're exactly right as to like the comparison of these two teams because that's what makes it so hype for me. Is like obviously I love the NAEU stuff. I am bought into that, but also they have a similar storyline where like these two teams weren't the best teams in the regions for a big part of the split, and then towards the end they showed their true colors and were absolutely beasting. And so I love that as well. That to me just is cherry on top to what I think would already be a really hype matchup. I don't mean to forget about Order, but I forgot about Order. So my prediction is still G2, EG, and Order in that order, no pun intended. But that doesn't mean I'm any less hyped for the games. I look, let's be honest, okay? When you see Caps popping off the way he did in playoffs, you have to be worried for Jojo Pum. No? Am I crazy? Like, I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, Caps, I think the both of us have kind of been like a little more critical than the masses have been of Caps, like last year and even towards the beginning of this year, because everyone was definitely still on like the Caps hype train, like, oh, it's Caps, like he's really, really good, but like, dude, that guy was kind of running it down in season 11.
There was some criticism. Yeah, there was some criticism, but maybe not as much as there should have been.
Yeah. But I mean, like, that's like star player. That happens with a lot of players. Like,
the same thing happened with Perks last year on C9. We've seen it a million times. It's not going to be the last time we see it.
But
yeah,
Caps is back,
like a beast again,
and that's scary. Their whole roster is looking pretty scary. Like this is like pretty much like the best I think Yankos has looked since like season 8-9, which is like that's really insane. Their bot lane is really insane. And Broken Blade, he does feel like a little bit of like a wild card because his champion pool is like really, really different in comparison to most other top laners. If you look back at like even NA versus EU stats, like there is like he was playing a lot. He was played like 3 games of Corki top. He's playing a lot of Yone top. He's just like playing a ton of carries. Like didn't really give a fuck and was just kind of stomping people in lane like without any jungle assistance. And that's I don't think that's going to be relevant right now because they're going up against Impact on EG, and I think I've always said this about Impact. Like he's the player that you need to worry about the least in terms of like being pressured in lane or dying to ganks or like surviving the early game. And I think that
Broken Blade's
sentiment.
pretty freaking good though, man.
But like he's never disappointed, and he goes up against like Nuguri and the Shy in Season 9 Worlds, and it's like completely fine solo killing them in some of those games. So like he'll be fine against Broken Blade. I'm more worried for EG with regards to mid jungle because I think that Caps and Yankos are looking like they did in Season 9, which is really scary.
So let me dish out a little bit of hopium for the listeners. And maybe some copium. I'll let you guys decide. If the one weapon that EG does have on their side is they have a coach and their jungler are both very familiar with Caps and Yankos. I think if you're hoping
What does that mean?
for,
How are they familiar with them? Because they played them?
yeah, they're very familiar. Like they're very familiar with the playstyle. They played against
okay.
them. Is that not a like they have experience literally going up against this jungle mid? No.
I guess, yeah.
They should, if you would expect people to have a really good understanding of how Caps and Yankos are going to play, I would point to Peter Dunn and to Inspired. So that is something where you're going to need these guys to use their knowledge of how they need to set up a game plan against G2 because, look, I'll just come out and say it right away. I don't think that Danny and Vulcan can run it down in lane the way they did over the LCS finals weekend and get away with it and pop off later. I don't think that can happen on the world stage against a team like G2. And so I think while that can still be your game plan, that's fine if you want to play that style of we're going to put all of our resources into Danny. G2 knows that's coming. They're not going to be surprised by if Danny's on a hyper carry or whatever, right? So you need to have something prepped for the style that G2 is going to play. And honestly, I don't know exactly what EG have in mind, but I'm sure they have something. Because I think pound for pound, I think G2 is just a better team. And that's not a hot take, but I just think that's the case. Does that mean EG can't win? No, of course not. EG can definitely fucking win, but they have it's a tough ask, honestly. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I don't think this group is going to be as simple as G2 8-0, EG 4-4, Order 0-8. I think we are going to see... while this is the group with 3 teams, so every team is going to play each other 4 times, I expect to see some not so like clean head-to-head records. Like, I think
let's
it's going to look a bit wonky.
How many wins does Order get?
They'll get 1. They'll win a game, I think.
And is it against EG?
I don't know. I think I'm just kind of like they might win a game.
Normally when we do these streams live, Lamau LP's in the chat and he's an OS representative and I just get the feeling that
maybe he's listening right now. I'll give you one win, brother.
I hope he's still listening to the YouTube VODs because if he is, he's gonna give it to me later if I get this wrong. But I'm gonna say they win 0.
Oh.
I think Order will win 0.
They have Biopanther. He's from Pentanet. He knows the secret sauce.
Next up, how many wins does EG get?
I say they'll get 5.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they're going to beat EG, or I think they're going to beat G2 once, and I think they're going to sweep Order. That's the way I have this group going. You know what's so bizarre? I know I've said this to you before, JNT. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast or not, but like I'm such a big fan of the players on G2, but because it's G2, I have to hate them. Like I love the NAEU rivalry. I need this team to crash and burn. I would love for Order to take a win off G2, even though, as you know, I'm a big Broken Blade fan and a big Caps fan. I need them to crash and burn. That's my mindset. Is that strange at all?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Good. Anyways, that should be fun though. I think this is going to be a really fun group. This is exactly what, if you're an NA or EU fan, this is exactly the group that you wanted to be drawn, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and that's what we're getting. So should be exciting. I also think the trash talk is hella funny too. Like there's a world where JoJo doesn't realize what he's getting into with his trash talk, but there's also a world where he knows he's about to get clapped and just doesn't give a shit. And I don't know which world we're living in, but I think both of them are very entertaining.
Oh, throwback to the Jensen. I'm gonna clap Faker.
Gonna clap Faker.
That's what I thought of when you said that.
Yeah. Do you think at that time Jensen knew that he was gonna get clapped by Faker?
No, I don't know. Like
Really? I think he did. Come on, it's Faker, man. No one
Yeah,
says
but
that is
like
like I'm actually going to destroy him. Do you think?
I don't know. I remember Cloud9 coming into Worlds with a lot of confidence that year.
Maybe I don't remember their confidence levels, but anyways, it's entertaining nonetheless, and so the group should be good. Last thing, we can agree that T1 is the favorite, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So then begs the question of what does it mean if T1 doesn't win? Is this absolute nightmare, or should they absolutely walk through this tournament, or where do you fall on it?
well, I think if they didn't win, it would probably split into like two different schools of thought. Because the one way will be like, well, LCK is actually not that good of a region, and T1 is just a good team that dominated the region, and maybe that means
Yeah,
like,
I wouldn't buy it.
but I'm just saying like some people might just construe the argument like that, whereas like T1 was just the rest of the LCK was not so good, and T1 was just smashing them, and LPL reigns supreme like usual. But then there's the other school of thought where it's like, oh, RNG actually look really really good, and they beat them, or who knows, maybe it's even G2. Like, I think for the most part, people are kind of putting RNG and G2 on similar levels. I wouldn't say that people are putting G2 above RNG, but I don't think that people think it's a clear 1, 2, 3. I think it's like a clear 1, and then RNG and G2 are like 2, and then like 2.2.
Really, eh? I would put it as a clear 1, 2, 3. I would. I
I don't
don't
know.
think G2 is going to be as good as RNG. And the
But
other thing too
I
is
think,
that
but RNG is also in a similar situation where they weren't the greatest team, throughout the most of their split, and then they turned it up in playoffs and they beat all the
sure.
favorites. They ran through the bracket. They looked really really strong the whole way through, similar to G2. And I do, don't get me wrong, RNG is insane. Like, listen, like you just look at the roster, like Bin, Wei, Xiaohu, Gala, and Ming. Like that roster is really cracked, but like G2's roster is also pretty cracked. Like, I don't know, man.
I still think that there's too much of a discrepancy in the regions, honestly. If this was 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said Europe is a lot closer to China, and I think most people would have agreed at the time. I don't know where people fall on it now, but I do think that there is a significant gap between 1, 2 being Korea, China, and then the West, honestly. I don't think that's that close. I mean, hey, maybe I'll be proven wrong, right? I don't mind being proved wrong. It happens all the time. Um, but yeah, I guess I don't think G2 is that flawless that they could be put up in the same level as RNG. I think RNG will be much better than them, but we're gonna learn throughout this tournament. We will see.
But
The other thing
T1
too,
should win.
yeah, I just want to finish my point on
T1
the
should win.
should T1 win thing because everyone is going to say that T1 is the favorite. There's no hot take there, but I am not on the like T1 need to win this tournament because I think that is a little bit disrespectful to RNG with how good that team should be, right? Again, these regions have never been far and away from each other for I don't even know. Like they've been close for the last how many years? Like 6, 5 or 6 years they've been really really close in skill levels these two regions.
4 since season 8.
When did season 7 was that not the first time the LPL won or was it season 8?
No, season 8. That was when.
So then 8, 9, 10, 11, and then now we're in 12. So this would be the 5th year, I guess.
Yeah, but even then, like season 8 was kind of weird because like LCK was like not even in the picture at all. Like NA made it farther than LCK at Worlds.
True, that was the collapse of Afrika Freaks and Cloud9 reigned supreme.
Not even Afrika Freaks. Like who the fuck else? Gen G got shit on. Like they finished last in that group. Who else was there?
I don't know, but I'm speaking from a North American fan, so point of view rather. So I just remember C9 clapping Afrika Freaks, and that's all that matters. But anyways, my point is that like I don't think the tournament is as free for T1 as people think it is, even though everyone thinks that they're the favorite, and myself included. I just don't think it's that free of a tournament. I guess is the really long version of what.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's free, but like I view them as like the clear-cut favorite.
Yep, I think most people would when you have a perfect season. So, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the durability stuff.
Yes.
Patch 12.10, the game is going to change a lot, JT. I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, so I'll let you start, and then I'll come in with the little bit that I do have.
Yeah, I don't know. I like, first and foremost, just from a person who plays this game and has been playing this game for quite a number of years now, reaching about like 9 years, I guess now. It's no surprise to like almost every single player that consistently has played the game over the course of the last 9 years that like the damage is just way too high in this game. And specifically, I think since like Runes Reforged and now the item rework, like the damage has gotten pretty out of control because a lot of the damage a lot of the damage in League, for the most part, is very front loaded now with, keystones and item actives on mythics and shit like that. So I'm actually really excited for them to make these really big changes in the next patch 12.8. I believe they're playing MSI on patch 12.8. I meant to say 12.10, but I think they're playing MSI on patch 12.8. Maybe it's 12.9. I'm not exactly sure. But 12.10, I think, is coming out next week. So that'll be the big change. They're making like pretty significant increases to like every single champion's base stats, which includes base HP, HP per level, armor per level, and MR per level, while also cutting down some healing, shielding, and lifesteal. And I know that they had previously announced about, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 months ago, that they did some testing where they were trying to like cut damage by a factor of like 20%, and it created a really unstable meta and not one that they thought was going to be healthy in the long term, because like tanks became OP and healing and shielding was actually stronger than it was, it was stronger than it was before, because since champions are more tanky, healing and shielding has even more power. So I think they said that they're sort of reaching for like 10% as opposed to 20% with these changes, which I just think in general are going to be really good, because I really don't like the way that a lot of the game is sort of being played out from a competitive standpoint, when you have these like constant 5v, like everything has now become 5v5 team fighting. And I think that's just because since everything is so front loaded, like you have to be there right when the team fight starts. Meaning like there's no there's no margin for error in terms of like trying to TP at an exact moment, or like playing the split push game. Like I think split push is one of the like things I enjoyed most within League in terms of both playing it and watching it from a competitive standpoint. Because
you don't want split pushing to get out of hand, though, right?
Yeah,
like, that could be really bad if that's the only meta. I think that gets pretty stale if that's the only, or if that's the meta way to win games. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm not saying that.
It just needs to
be careful about how meta that becomes.
It just needs to be another avenue for you to win the game, because
Agreed.
It feels like nowadays in League, you basically have to draft towards the 5v5 and playing around objectives, because, admittedly, like that's what they've sort of turned the game into, is like it's around fighting early dragons, then it's around fighting Rift Herald, then it's around fighting for Dragon Soul, then it's around fighting for Baron and Elder. And well, I think that is very, it makes for very exciting moments within the game at those specific instances of big 5v5 team fighting. I think it just makes the rest of the game very stale, because it's all about hitting your items for those specific breakpoints. And, I've said this before, like I'm just really over like the current meta of like, we farm for 5 minutes, fight over objective. Farm for 5 minutes, fight over objective. Farm for 5 minutes, fight over objective. And I think that you do need other avenues in order to win the game. That's not just straight up 5v5ing and playing around like Dragon Soul and Baron and Elder Drake. And like I said, not to say that I want split push to become the main thing and one of the things that's super, super meta, but even like macro calls that are just as simple as like 1-3-1ing or 4-1ing, like we just don't see that anymore, because you basically have to be 5v5ing at these specific time breakpoints. And I don't know. It's just, I think the meta.
You see a lot more 4-1s rather than 1-3-1s, because you want to be grouped for the team fights, right? Like you still have someone putting pressure in a side lane, but usually it's someone who has TP and is ready to join for the 5v5. Otherwise, you can't have them split.
Yeah, but even in the case of that, like there's no like. What doesn't exist anymore is like sacking the objective to then get your split pusher to go to like take a top tower or take a top inhibitor or take a nexus tower, because there's so much of the power in the game is within those Dragon Souls and the Baron buff and the Elder buff that you basically no matter what, like if you're fighting over the objective, like you have to TP, like no questions asked. Like it's never worth to trade for like a tower or an inhib if you lose Dragon Soul or you lose Baron or you lose Elder in the certain meta, because like those are just like super strict win conditions.
Even Soul Point, you take a tower even over Soul Point, right?
Exactly. And I just think that a meta like this, where champions are going to be innately a little bit more tankier, allows for, some lengthier team fights in terms of like, even if you lose a player right from the get-go, like it still can be comebackable 4v5, because like quite often nowadays, like it's not, like if you lose that first player, a player gets picked off, a player just gets blown up. It's like, it's almost just like, well, fuck the team fight. Like we just got to back off and like give the objective. So I just think that it's it's a necessary change to sort of help the game to progress like in the future. Like I don't think this is going to be like some sweeping change that is going to save the game and is going to make the game like really good right away. I think this is something that is they have to do now to sort of set themselves up for the future, because at this point, like with all 5v5ing, like how else is the game going to evolve? And I think like this is like the first step of the new league that they're going to create further down the line.
I think for me, I'm just not very picky. Like, I don't mind the way the game is now, and I don't think I'm going to mind the changes, honestly. I didn't hate tank meta way back in the day. I didn't hate juggernaut meta.
I
Like,
love that shit.
I am just not picky when it comes to that stuff. So for me, that's why I don't really have much of an opinion on this, other than the game's going to change. So I just think, oh, change, cool. I don't mind that. That sounds like fun. We'll see how the game changes, and maybe we see some new champions. That's what I'm most looking forward to. Where I am a little bit worried about this, and I don't really think there's much you can do about it, is every year we see MSI representatives kind of struggle after MSI because they're usually burnt out. And this patch is going to hit right after,
That's true.
or rather, like, so that's the problem where I have, where it's like, I think MSI teams are even at a higher disadvantage this year than normal. And that's what I'm a little bit worried for. Again, not that there's much you can do about that, but if teams that go to MSI struggle in Summer Split, I think it's going to be much, much worse this year. And that could be troubling. Maybe, remember how we talked earlier about what 3 teams for NA would go? Maybe that could hurt EG's chances of going to Worlds come summer if this patch change takes a really long time to adapt to, and if they're dealing with some burnout. That's all speculatory, but it's possible that they're dealing with some burnout because, well, they're human. And grinding for MSI takes a lot out of you, right? So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think this is definitely going to affect MSI representatives worse than any other team.
Yeah, I actually hadn't even thought about that because they've avoided making these like very sweeping changes to the game in the middle of the season. Like that was something that they always used to do back in like season 5, 6, 7, 8. Like I think in season 5 they introduced, like that was when they introduced like the new drag system where it was like you would stack like not elemental dragons, but it was like once you hit 5 you got like some big ass buff. Do you remember that, like way back then?
Wait, what are we talking about?
Well, I just remember, like they would do a lot of changes in the mid-season. Like they would make a point to make very big changes in the middle of the season, whether it was like something to do with the map, something to do with the major objectives, something to do with like a champion class. Like they did like the tank rework with like Zac and Maokai. Like that occurred in the middle of the season. They did all the assassin changes, which I think were in like the middle of the season. That's what they did, like the reworked Rengar, the reworked LeBlanc,
yes.
And I think I think that was also when they changed Talon. Maybe I have that incorrect, but
I think so. No, I think so.
But they did a lot of assassin changes then. Oh, that's because they also did all the invisibility stuff as well. But they've kind of strayed away now from like making these big sweeping changes in the middle of the season, and instead doing like this really, really lengthy preseason where they do these really big changes like reset the items, add in the elemental drakes, change the map, make stuff like that. So I think I'm glad to see that they're going back to making some bigger changes in the middle of the season, because I do think that it makes for more of an exciting, a difference in the meta. Because I think a lot of people, one complaint that they've had this season specifically is that the meta for the most part is very similar to what we saw of last year, and for the average viewer that can be kind of boring. And I totally get that sentiment, and while I don't consider myself the average viewer because I watch a lot of it, but I just found this meta boring, and maybe like that's just me, and I don't know, but I'm definitely interested to see the meta change. But I do think that while we could see some problems with balancing and the meta moving forward in the short term, I think it's what's necessary for the game in the long run.
What I did like about the current meta, and I don't know how most people feel about this, but I didn't mind watching Jinx Aphelios every game. I love those 80 carries. I think they're fun to watch. So, like, that I love watching. And then there's the classic Corki Azir that when we were seeing that all the time, no one really likes to see that. I mean, me personally, I actually didn't even mind Corki because I think even Poke can be fun. But when you're seeing the same champions over and over again, usually it gets pretty stale. But for me, it actually didn't when it came to the 80 carry specifically, but with Jinx Aphelios. I really like those two champions. But when you have a champion that requires resets, or maybe not requires resets, but sort of, like with Jinx, like these changes kind of make me think we won't see Jinx as much. But
maybe.
Whatever. I don't know. Change is fine with me. There's always something fun. What I really don't like is I really didn't like Hecarim Udyr last year. That's the stuff that I thought was boring. I don't want to see that all the time.
Yeah. I guess like not that we're going to continue about this conversation, but I didn't mean like champion specific. I just meant like how the game is played, sort of.
Yeah.
But there are some champions.
How the game is
it's
played,
true,
right?
and some champions do get really stale. Like Hecarim Udyr, like that shit got so fucking sleeper. Like not even like halfway through the season, it was just like, can we just move on from this shit?
Yeah. Okay, let's get the quick news.
Yeah, we got a little bit of quick news. Most of it was in all of our roster stuff that we talked about earlier. But first thing, I wanted to include this because I wanted to talk about this because Carrier re-signed with T1 for another year. His contract ends in 2023, and we didn't really talk about T1 in our MSI segment, but I think I said this early on in this split. When it comes to talking about like the best player in the world, like I
Yeah,
don't think
people are
people
saying Carrier right
yeah,
now.
like people don't normally look to support because it's usually always a mid laner or jungler. It was either Faker, there's been other players in between like Rookie, the Shy, when Damwon was really popping off, it was like Showmaker or Canyon. And Keria has kind of like entered that conversation. And I think at the current moment, people consider him the best player in the world. And I did watch like a good amount of LCK this past split. Like this guy is insane. Like
It's notable so I did not watch a lot of LCK this split specifically, but I have heard many people say
he's so
that
cracked.
Carrier is the best player in the world right now. And when a team signs the best player in the world, that is notable news.
Yeah,
That's
like
a big deal. So that's interesting. The fact that you have the best player in the world playing with the GOAT, that's just gonna be good for your future. I think that's pretty simple.
yeah, and like you had like for the most part, like apart from Faker, like T1 has a lot of young players. Like
Yeah.
Zeus is a young player who's I think playing his first. He played his first full split on T1. I think he had played some games here and there, like with when Kana was still on the team. But Owner, he joined the team in season 11. He's looking really good. Gumayushi, like that guy's fucking insane. Like he's Teddy 2.0. He's insane, and like you said, Carry is the best player in the world right now, and Faker is like kind of looking like Faker right now. So
Yeah.
that's good.
He been Faker out there. Okay, what
Yeah.
else we got?
Next up, this was some little bit of EU news. Niski, he's back. We talked about Jensen earlier. Niski's back as well. He's joining Mad Lions for summer split. I remember we talked about this a couple episodes ago, and the main player we were talking about when it came to Mad Lions was keeping El Yoya, whether or not he was going to be on the roster going forward. And I think that signing Niski is a good step forward to ensuring that El Yoya stays with the team, and you are going to try to make playoffs / worlds push for summer split, because I think that the players on this team have the potential to do so.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really have anything else to add. I'm happy Niski's back. I think that he's a guy that belongs in pro play, not just from obviously from a skill point of view, but from a personality point of view. Like there's a lot of Niski fans out there, so I think it's just healthy for League of Legends when he's playing on a team. So it's good. He deserved a team in the first place, so now he's got one.
Next up, Xmithy. He's back, baby, joining TSM as their academy head coach. God knows why you would.
I'm so happy for
TSM.
Smithy getting a coaching opportunity, but also bold move going to TSM at this point in time.
I actually wonder, like, if
TSM must have paid him a good buck.
Yeah, like that's what I wonder. Like, I think he just probably did it for the money. Like, fuck, like, I don't know. Like, I honestly thought he did it. Like, that's what it seems like. He did it for the money. Because, like, why would Smithy come back to coach academy when he hasn't been involved in the league scene since season 10? And all of a sudden he's back, and I assume TSM probably wrote him a fat check.
Let's not forget that Xmithy is probably one of the best minds that North America has ever produced for the game. Like, he was one of the best junglers North America has ever had. Whenever you're talking about the best junglers in North America, Xmithy's name comes out all the time. So it's a really valuable signing, I would have to say, for TSM. Just because Xmithy's a macro guy, right? He was never flashy or anything like that. But being able to teach young players with good hands how to play the game from a macro standpoint is incredibly valuable. And you have to imagine that Xmithy brings that to TSM Academy. So that's kind of hype for TSM that they were able to sign someone, because it looked like in the offseason they weren't really able to do many changes when we talked about their main roster. So at least this is somewhere where they got a good change.
All right, last
Because they had to let go of Peter Zhang, if people don't remember.
XD. TSM. Omega Law. Last up, the Asia Games 2022 was postponed. Why that is relevant is because the LPL and the LCK players who were going to go compete in the Asia Games, the event actually was scheduled from September the 10th, 25th, which, if you can think 3 months into the future, is right between the end of Summer Split and the start of Worlds. So it seemed like a lot of players and teams were concerned that, their respective players and therefore their teams were going to get hurt because they wouldn't be able to fully practice on preparing for Worlds, which, always, as we know, starts up in late September, early October. So I think for the teams that are looking to go to Worlds, who may have had players that would be representing them in the Asia Games, are breathing a bit of a sigh of relief because they're going to have those players with them prepping if they do end up making Worlds. And I think they said that they're going to schedule it to sometime after Worlds.
Gotcha.
So,
That's
yeah.
kind of tough because that's like your off season. That's where you want to be chilling and not burning out. But
Yeah, I
okay.
guess, but it's like a hype thing, so I
Yeah.
think they probably want to do it, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yep. Next.
That's it.
No.
Oh, you have more?
Well, you said you were gonna add the mask thing to the.
Oh, I totally forgot I just forgot to say that on MSI thing.
I don't even have it on my whatever here.
I wrote
Anyways.
it. I wrote it down for MSI. I just didn't say it. But this came out like 2 hours before we're recording this. Apparently, the players at MSI, while they're playing on stage, must wear a mask while playing. So I have two thoughts on this. First of all, that sucks because they're probably not used to wearing a mask at all while they're playing, and for them to have to do that on stage for the first time will just not really make them be as comfortable as they would probably want to be.
You don't want to be worrying about a mask when you're going into international play. You want to be worrying about what champion you're going to play, what play style you want to play, what your game plan is against that team, blah, 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 not a mask.
And second of all, if the players are forced to wear masks because of safety concerns, then you probably shouldn't be holding the event in the first place. If that's actually the case, I'm kind of
that though. Careful what you wish for, James.
dude, but I'm just kind of surprised that the event. Well, I'm not surprised the event is still going on, but the fact that they are now wanting the players to play with masks on out of cause for concern. At that point, shouldn't you just not play in the venue and play in hotels at that point? Because you're already playing on a created 35 ping for the LPL. At that point, shouldn't you just play from not from home, but just play from in Korea, but at your team hotels, your team practice facilities, or whatever? I don't know.
Do I dare say that this might be money related?
I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's just the thought that comes to mind.
Yeah,
I don't know. The only question I have about it is why are they finding this out today? Why are they finding this out hours before? That's what I don't get. But also, apparently the rule book says you don't have to wear one, so maybe they're going to be able to get by that. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I know Vulcan didn't seem too happy about it, and Peter Dunn also put out a tweet. And there's probably still discussion happening about it right now as we record this. So maybe they've already figured out a way to get around it. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait a couple of hours and see.
Yeah, MSI starts in 2 hours, so from when we're recording this.
Okay, now that's everything, right, J&T?
Yeah.
Okay. Quick shout outs to all of you people that continue to listen. We love you all very much. And also, we haven't gotten any feedback in a while.
Yeah, feel free to flame.
If you guys do have feedback, I prefer to not get flamed. I prefer to get feedback.
No,
I know what J&T's saying.
Just construct your flame and
seriously
some
though,
nice
we haven't gotten feedback
sentences.
in a while. So if there's stuff that you guys like or don't like, we do need to hear about it. So feel free to leave comments and to let us know. You could also hop in our Discord. We have a Discord where you can even DM us if you want to in Discord. By all means, if you want to find a way to reach out to us and give us some feedback, that will be very much appreciated. Anything else, J&T? Any other shout outs?
I think that's it.
I'm going to shout out your dog because I like your dog.
She's not allowed upstairs here, so.
Okay. All right. That's it, guys. Enjoy MSI. It should be a good time. MSI is finally here, and it should be fun. So that's going to be it for us. We'll see you guys next week, probably at the same time, maybe with a live stream, but probably not. This has been episode 84 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Take care, guys.